There are moments in life when we stop and ask ourselves, how did I get here? It's that sudden awareness that somewhere along the way, the path we thought we were on has blurred, the direction we once trusted feels uncertain, and we find ourselves standing still, not knowing whether to take a step forward or back. That is what it means to feel lost. It's not always about being in the wrong place physically, it's about being unsettled deep within, uncertain of who we are, where we're going, or what our purpose really is. And if we're honest, most of us have felt that way more than once. It can happen in the quiet of a sleepless night when questions swirl and there seems to be no answer. It can happen in the busyness of a crowded room when, despite being surrounded by people, we feel disconnected and invisible. Sometimes it comes in seasons of disappointment when the plans we were so sure about fall apart and the future suddenly looks blank. And sometimes it comes not from tragedy but from success. Yes, even when we've accomplished the very things we worked for, there can still be an emptiness inside, a quiet voice asking, is this it? Is this really all there is? That sense of being lost does not discriminate. It comes to the young trying to figure out who they are, and it comes to the old who wonder if their best years have passed them by. Being lost is more than confusion. It's a disconnection from direction. We are wired to move forward with purpose, but when purpose is missing, life begins to feel like wandering through a fog with no landmarks to guide us. And that fog can be suffocating. We begin to question everything, our relationships, our choices, our worth. We begin to doubt whether there is even a path for us at all. That's why so many in that state look for something, anything that promises clarity. Some chase after quick fixes, some bury themselves in work, some numb the ache with distractions. But no matter what we reach for, if it doesn't address the deeper need, it leaves us right where we started, lost, only now more exhausted than before. And yet there's something strangely valuable about recognizing when we are lost. Because to admit that we are lost is to admit that we can't do it on our own. It takes humility to say, I don't know the way, but that honesty opens the door for change. It's the moment we stop pretending we've got it all figured out and start searching for the real answer. There is power in that moment, because the truth is, as long as we deny it, we will keep walking in circles. But when we admit it, we begin to look for direction outside of ourselves. If you've ever been driving and realized you missed the turn, the worst thing you can do is keep going further in the wrong direction. At some point you have to stop, acknowledge that you're off course, and be willing to turn around. Life works the same way. When we finally come face to face with that inner reality, that sense of being lost, our next step is not to hide it but to confront it. That is where hope begins to break through, because the moment we recognize that we are lost is the very moment we become ready to be found. And friend, maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you've been putting on a strong face, convincing everyone else that you've got it together, but inside you're exhausted from wandering. Maybe you've tried every road you thought would bring you fulfillment, and yet each one left you more restless than before. Maybe you're in that fog of uncertainty, wondering if anyone even sees how disoriented you feel. Let me assure you, you are not alone. The very fact that you feel that ache, that unsettledness, is proof that there is something more. It's proof that there is a path and that you were never meant to wander forever. Recognizing that you are lost is not weakness, it's the beginning of strength. It's the moment the journey shifts, because only when you realize where you are can you begin to see where you need to go. And only when you admit that you need direction can you finally be open to the one who gives it. That is where the story of being lost begins to transform into the story of being found. When we think about the dangers of being lost, most of us imagine someone wandering through a forest or driving down the wrong road. But in life, being lost without purpose is far more dangerous, because it doesn't just leave us disoriented, it leaves us vulnerable. When we don't have a clear direction guiding us, anything can begin to pull us. The currents of culture, the voices of others, the temptations of the moment, all of them become louder and stronger when we don't have an anchor. Without a sense of purpose, we drift, and drifting always leads us somewhere we never intended to go. The truth is, no one ever wakes up one day and says, I think I'll ruin my life today. No one sets out with the intention of ending up broken, empty, or far from who they were meant to be. It happens slowly, gradually, almost unnoticed. A compromise here, a distraction there, one wrong step that doesn't seem so serious at the time, and before long the path we're on has taken us miles away from where we should have been. That's what makes wandering without purpose so dangerous. It doesn't feel dramatic in the moment. It feels casual, even harmless. But drifting never takes us closer to truth. It always carries us farther away. And while we're drifting, the world is more than willing to offer substitutes for direction. There are countless voices telling us what matters, what we should chase, who we should be. Some say success is the answer. Others tell us happiness is found in possessions, in relationships, in status, in recognition. And because we long for meaning, we start chasing those things, hoping one of them will silence the emptiness inside. But they never do. Instead, they leave us tired, restless, and more confused than when we started. It's like drinking salt water when we're thirsty. It promises to satisfy, but in the end, it only leaves us emptier. When life lacks purpose, even good things can become destructive. Work can become an obsession that consumes us. Relationships can become idols we depend on for our worth. Success can turn into a prison where no achievement ever feels like enough. Without a compass, even the blessings of life can twist into burdens, because we're asking them to do something they were never meant to do, to give us identity and direction. And when they fail, as they always will, we find ourselves even more adrift. But here's what makes it worse. When we live without purpose long enough, we start to believe that this wandering is normal. We convince ourselves that everyone feels this way, that life is just one long cycle of searching and never finding. And once that lie takes root, we stop even looking for meaning. We settle for less than what we were created for. That's the tragedy of drifting. It doesn't just rob us of joy in the present, it blinds us to the possibility of something greater. There's another danger in wandering without purpose. It makes us easy prey for the wrong voices. When you don't know where you're going, anyone who sounds confident can lead you. That's why so many fall into destructive habits, harmful relationships, or empty philosophies. They're looking for guidance, but without discernment, they end up trusting the wrong guide. And every step in the wrong direction only deepens the sense of being lost. Maybe you've felt that weight. Maybe you've known what it's like to give your heart to something you thought would fulfill you, only to realize it left you emptier than before. Maybe you've chased after success, recognition, or approval, only to find that each achievement was like sand slipping through your fingers. Or maybe you've just gone through the motions day after day, feeling like you're living but not truly alive. That is the reality of wandering without purpose. It's not just dangerous, it's devastating. But here's the good news: just because you've been drifting doesn't mean you have to stay that way. Recognizing the danger of wandering is the first step toward turning around. It's the moment you stop letting the currents of life carry you wherever they please and decide to anchor yourself to something greater. Purpose is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Without it, we are lost. With it, we are unstoppable. And until we find that purpose, we will always be searching, always drifting, always vulnerable. But the moment we find it, the wandering ends and the journey truly begins. Deep inside every human heart lies a longing that nothing in this world can seem to quiet. It's that ache for belonging, that hunger for love, that restless search for meaning. When someone feels lost in life, it's not only about being directionless, it's about being disconnected from that sense of significance we were created to know, and that longing is universal. It doesn't matter how old we are, how successful we've been, or how much we've accumulated. There's always that inner voice that asks, do I really matter? Am I truly loved? Do I belong anywhere? We spend much of our lives trying to answer those questions. From the time we're young, we crave affirmation. Children seek it from their parents. Teenagers search for it among their friends. Adults chase it in careers, in relationships, in the applause of others. It's as if we're all carrying around a sign that says, tell me I'm valuable, show me I matter, prove to me I belong. And while people may offer moments of affirmation, no human voice is strong enough to fill that void completely. Compliments fade. Applause dies down. Relationships, as precious as they are, can fail. And when those things falter, the ache for belonging only grows louder. That's why so many chase after substitutes. Some bury themselves in their work, hoping that achievement will validate their worth. Some seek out relationships not for love but for affirmation, believing another person's presence will finally silence the emptiness inside. Others numb the ache with distractions, entertainment, material possessions, even destructive habits, anything to avoid facing that deep question of identity and meaning. But at the end of the day, no matter what path we take, the silence always returns. Because what we are really searching for is not just approval but unconditional love. Not just recognition but eternal significance. This longing is not an accident. It's not a flaw in our design, it's evidence of it. We were created with this deep hunger because we were never meant to be satisfied apart from the one who made us. That desire for belonging is really a desire for home, not a physical home, but a spiritual one. A place where we are fully known, fully loved, fully accepted. A place where our value isn't determined by what we achieve, but by who we are. Think about it, if possessions could satisfy that longing, the wealthiest people in the world would be the happiest, yet we know that's not the case. If success could silence the ache, then those at the top would never feel empty. But how many stories have we heard of people who reached the peak only to confess it wasn't enough? If relationships alone could do it, then no one in love would ever feel lonely. But even the closest bond between two people cannot bear the weight of our eternal need for significance. These things can bring moments of joy, but they cannot anchor the soul. That's why so many people, even when surrounded by blessings, still feel lost. Because the longing is deeper than circumstances. It's not just about wanting more out of life, it's about wanting the life we were created for. Until that longing is met, we remain restless. Until that hunger is filled, we remain searching. Until that ache is answered, we remain lost. And maybe that's exactly where you find yourself today. Maybe you've been chasing after things that promised fulfillment, only to discover they left you emptier than before. Maybe you've been looking for your worth in the eyes of others, only to realize their approval is never consistent enough to make you feel secure. Or maybe you've simply been running, not even sure what you're running toward, just hoping something out there will finally make you feel at home. But here's the truth. The longing you feel is not something to be ashamed of. It's not weakness. It's evidence that you were made for something greater. That cry for belonging is the deepest part of your soul, reaching for the place it was created to rest. It's a reminder that you were not designed to wander forever, but to be found, to be loved, and to live with meaning that cannot be shaken. And until that longing is satisfied, nothing else will ever truly be enough. One of the greatest truths we can hold on to when we feel lost is this: no matter how far we've wandered, there is always a way back. It doesn't matter how many wrong turns we've taken, how many mistakes we've made, or how long we've been drifting. Direction is never truly gone because there is one who never stops reaching for us. Life can take us down some dark roads, but the light of divine guidance is never out of reach. And when that light breaks through, everything changes. Think about how we navigate when we're lost physically. A compass or a map suddenly becomes more valuable than anything else we carry because it doesn't just tell us where we are, it shows us the way home. In the same way, God's Word is that compass for our souls. When confusion clouds our minds and the world bombards us with voices pulling in every direction, Scripture cuts through the noise with clarity. It doesn't just give us vague encouragement, it gives us direction. It reminds us of who we are, where we belong, and what truly matters. Without it, we stumble. With it, we see. And it's not just the Word, it's the Spirit of God Himself guiding us in ways we sometimes can't even explain. There are moments when a whisper in the heart, a conviction deep within, a peace that doesn't make sense, becomes the very thing that steers us away from disaster and back toward life. That's not coincidence. That's not chance. That's divine guidance. Because God never leaves His children wandering without hope. He steps into our confusion not to condemn us for being lost, but to lovingly lead us toward truth. So many people today are searching for guidance in all the wrong places. They turn to culture, to trends, to popular opinion, hoping someone or something will show them the way. But human wisdom shifts like sand. It changes with the times and it fails when tested. God's truth, however, does not move. It's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And when everything else feels uncertain, that unshakable foundation becomes our lifeline. The beauty of divine guidance is that it's personal. God doesn't just lead humanity as a crowd, He leads each of us individually, step by step, according to the path He has prepared. That means your journey doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You're not called to walk in someone else's shoes. You're not meant to compare your road with another's. The guidance God gives you is designed for you because He knows you by name, He knows your struggles, He knows your potential, and He knows exactly what it will take to bring you home. But here's where many of us struggle. We want the whole map laid out in front of us. We want to see the destination, the turns, the timeline all at once. Yet divine guidance rarely works that way. More often it's one step at a time, just enough light for the next move. And that can be frustrating to a heart that craves control. But it's also freeing because it means we don't have to have everything figured out. We just have to trust the one who sees what we cannot. One step of obedience, one choice of faith, one act of surrender at a time, and slowly the path unfolds. Maybe right now you're standing at a crossroads, unsure which way to go. Maybe you've been wandering so long that you don't even know where to begin. Here's the hope you need to hold on to. You don't have to find the way alone. You don't have to depend on your own wisdom because there is a shepherd who walks ahead of you, calling you by name, leading you with love. His guidance is not meant to confuse you, but to bring peace. It's not designed to trap you, but to set you free. And once you've experienced that guidance, once you've allowed God to direct your steps, you begin to see that being lost was never meant to be the end of your story. It was meant to be the turning point, the place where you stopped relying on yourself and started depending on Him. Because when His Word becomes your compass and His Spirit becomes your guide, you don't just find your way, you discover the path you were created for all along. That is the power of divine guidance. It takes what is broken, confused, and wandering and transforms it into a life of clarity, peace, and purpose. There is something life-changing about the moment we begin to rediscover who we are meant to be. For so long, being lost feels like living in a fog, uncertain, unsettled, unsure of where the road is leading. But clarity begins to return when identity is restored. And here is the truth: so much of our wandering in life comes from forgetting who we really are. We let the world define us, we let circumstances shape us, and we let the voices of others determine our worth. When that happens, we lose sight of the person God created us to be, and the direction we were meant to walk in slips further and further away. Identity is the foundation of direction. If you don't know who you are, you'll never truly know where you're supposed to go. That's why rediscovering identity is so powerful. It's not just about building confidence or positive thinking, it's about anchoring your life in the truth of who you were created to be. The world tells us to create our own identity, to reinvent ourselves whenever we feel like it. But when identity is built on shifting sand, it crumbles under the weight of disappointment. True identity isn't something we invent, it's something we receive. It's given to us by the one who designed us, and it never changes, no matter how far we've wandered. Think about how easily we attach our sense of worth to fragile things: a career, a relationship, a financial status, an image we project to the world. All of these things feel strong in the moment, but they are fragile foundations. Lose the job, and you question your worth. Lose the relationship, and you question your value. Lose your status, and you question your identity. But when your identity is rooted in God, none of those losses can take away who you are, because your value is not based on what you have, but on who He says you are. And when that truth begins to take root, direction starts to follow. You no longer chase after empty pursuits trying to prove yourself. You no longer wander in search of affirmation from others. You no longer live in fear of not being enough. Instead, you begin to walk with confidence, not because you know every step ahead, but because you know the one who leads you. And with that confidence, every decision, every step, every choice becomes clearer. You start living not as someone desperate for purpose, but as someone who already carries it. The rediscovery of identity is also the rediscovery of calling. Each of us was created with gifts, with passions, with a unique design. But when we're lost, those gifts get buried under the weight of confusion. We stop dreaming. We stop believing we have something to offer. We settle into survival mode, just trying to get through each day. But when God restores identity, He awakens those gifts again. Suddenly, the dreams that once felt impossible begin to stir in your heart. The talents you thought were wasted begin to shine with new purpose. You realize you weren't created to drift, you were created to contribute, to serve, to shine a light in the very place you stand. And this transformation doesn't just affect you, it touches everyone around you. A person who has rediscovered their identity becomes a person of influence. They carry peace in their presence because they're no longer striving for approval. They carry confidence in their steps because they're no longer defined by failure. They carry hope in their words because they know what it's like to be lost, and they know the joy of being found. And when others see that change, it inspires them to believe that the same transformation is possible for them too. Maybe you've been living under the weight of labels others gave you, or labels you put on yourself after years of disappointment. Maybe you've believed you are your mistakes, or that your failures define your future. But none of those things have the final word over you. Rediscovering identity means stripping away those lies and embracing the truth of who you've always been in God's eyes. It means walking not as a lost wanderer, but as a son or daughter with a place, a purpose, and a future. And when that shift happens, direction becomes clear. The fog begins to lift. The wandering comes to an end. Because in rediscovering who you are, you also rediscover where you are meant to go. That is the moment when being lost turns into being found, and life begins to take on the meaning it was always meant to have. There is something powerful about the story of being lost, but there is something even more powerful about the story of being found. To be lost is to wander, to ache, to feel disconnected from meaning. But to be found is not just about being rescued from confusion, it is about being restored to life, to hope, to purpose. Being found changes everything because it takes us from drifting aimlessly to walking with direction. It takes us from emptiness to fulfillment. It takes us from questioning our worth to standing firm in the knowledge that we are deeply loved and eternally significant. When a person is found, they don't just return to where they were before, they are changed. They see life differently. The struggles of being lost give them perspective. The pain of wandering gives them compassion. The joy of finding direction gives them a strength they never had before. It's like someone who has been wandering in darkness finally stepping into the light. The same world is around them, but it looks completely different because now they can see. And what's beautiful is that being found doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. The challenges don't disappear. The storms still come. But the difference is that now you're not facing them alone. You're not stumbling without direction. You're not leaning on your own strength to figure it out. You have an anchor that holds, a compass that guides, and a shepherd who walks beside you. That is what it means to be found. It's not the absence of struggle, it's the presence of hope. There's also a freedom that comes when you're found. When you were lost, you were weighed down by confusion, by the opinions of others, by the burden of trying to prove yourself. But once you've been found, you no longer live under that pressure. You don't need to perform for worth, because you know your worth has already been secured. You don't need to fear rejection, because you've already been fully accepted. You don't need to chase after temporary fixes, because you've discovered the source of lasting peace. That kind of freedom is life-changing. It lifts the weight off your shoulders and allows you to walk with a joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. And perhaps one of the most beautiful parts of being found is the transformation it brings, not just for you, but for those around you. When others see your life change, when they see the peace in your eyes, the confidence in your steps, the joy in your heart, they can't help but be drawn to it. They wonder what happened, what shifted, what made the difference. And your story becomes more than your story. It becomes a light that points others toward the same hope you've discovered. That's how lives are multiplied in impact. That's how families change, communities change, generations change. One lost soul found, and then another and another, until the ripple of transformation spreads farther than you could ever imagine. Maybe that's why the image of being found is so moving. It's not just about survival, it's about restoration. Imagine a lost child being reunited with a parent. The relief, the embrace, the tears of joy. It's not just about being safe again, it's about being home again. That's what happens to a soul that was wandering and finally discovers the love it was created for. It's not just found, it's embraced, restored, and renewed. Perhaps you've been lost for a long time. Perhaps you've tried every path the world offered and still the emptiness remained. But the moment you allow yourself to be found, the moment you step into the arms of the one who has been searching for you all along, everything changes. You're no longer defined by your past, no longer chained to your mistakes, no longer wandering without purpose. You are found, you are loved, and you are free. And once you've been found, there's no going back to the wandering because you've tasted what it means to truly live. That is the miracle of grace. That is the joy of restoration. That is the power of a life transformed.